Nelson's flagship HMS Victory, a fantastic reminder of Britain's naval supremacy in the 19th century. But Portsmouth's history as a seaport goes back to medieval times. In the 13th century, the harbour was a bit further along the coast, and close by was the hospital, which back then wasn't just a place for the sick, but also provided accommodation for travellers. This church was originally part of that hospital, and Time Team have been asked to find the complex of medieval buildings that would have stretched out into this field. You'd have thought that would have been a pretty easy task, but we know that a Tudor mansion was built on top of it, not to mention a whole load of Second World War activity, including a number of German bombs falling here. So can we get at the medieval history without calling in the bomb squad? The deep natural harbour at Portsmouth made it a much-used crossing point to France in medieval times, and the town went on to become the most heavily defended in England after Henry VIII made it the base for the Royal Navy in the 16th century. Our site at Governor's Green sits within one of the last remaining defensive walls that enclose the old town, and the Garrison Church, as it's known today, was originally part of a medieval hospital built here in the 13th century. This building survived because it was used as a chapel for a Tudor mansion, and then later on it became a place of worship for the armed forces until a bomb destroyed the roof in World War II. Tim, you're a member of the Friends of the Garrison Church, aren't you?
I work with them, yes.
And you invited us here?
I did.
Why? What did you want to find out?
Well, there's a 300-year gap between when the church was built in 1212 and the first reliable map we've got in about 1540. So, yes, if you can paint a picture that covers that period, it would be wonderful.
Meg, when we talk about a medieval hospital, what exactly do we mean?
We mean a place where old people would have lived, sick people would have lived, but also just a place where travellers would have stayed. So it's accommodation for various types of people.
This map, made around 1540, is thought to be one of the first accurate maps drawn in England. It was made to show the defences around the town, but it also gives us our earliest depiction of the hospital site.
There we are. This is just the resistance so far. Just to orientate, there's the church. And Stuart talked about a road line coming through here. And what we've got in black, that's the high resistance. So these are all buildings and actually rooms within buildings or separate buildings. I mean, there's so much detail going on. I need more time to actually sort out everything.
But you see, that's where we come in, John. We put the trenches in to tell you what that geophysics mean.
The plan is to open up a large area to see exactly what geophys are detecting here. This 3x5 metre trench is targeted here, over what appears to be a junction between several walls. But we don't know if this is part of the original medieval hospital or the later Tudor buildings on this site.
Yeah, that's hard there again.
Geophys, in fact, may have detected some modern stuff here, because already Phil's wondering if he's uncovering a concrete surface.
God, I hope we ain't got all the archaeology underneath concrete. Don't bear thinking about, do it?
It's part of a big jug by the looks of it.
That's huge.
Beautifully made, nice and thick. I suppose we'll have to wait for the pot expert to have a look at this for us, won't we?
Yeah.
Oh. Better still, in Trench 2, it looks like we're starting to find evidence of a medieval building.
If you turn it over, you can actually see the tool marks running in an angle.
That looks very much like 13th century stone, a little...
What makes you say that's 13th century?
Well, it looks like classic early English, which is our main architectural style of the 13th century. It's got these small sort of colonnette, rather nice sort of circular design, quite delicate really.
What sort of part of a building might that come from?
It looks like it's part of a reveal or something, a window reveal or a door reveal.
So this may have been part of a medieval door frame like this. The doorway perhaps into a medieval room with a posh stone floor, because as you can see, Trench 2 seems to be getting better and better by the minute. End of day one. This trench over here, Trench 1, that's proved a bit disappointing. There's so much of that comparatively modern floor surface. But this trench, Trench 2, completely different matter. All the archaeologists are getting really excited about it, although you wouldn't know it, would it? It's so freezing
It's so
cold.
cold, I don't believe it.
But here we've got these flagstones, which are apparently Purbeck marble, and you think you've got a medieval wall coming up?
Certainly this one is here with the door stopped there for the door to go against it.
And it ties in apparently with the plans.
It does. It's on the same alignment of the row of buildings going in that direction.
So tomorrow we're going to extend the trench in this direction and see whether or not we've got at least a glimmer of our medieval hospital. Fingers crossed. Should we go home? Over in Trench 1, Phil opened up a big area yesterday and found a lot of modern concrete. But he also revealed a few stone walls that could be medieval. So he too is extending his trench to help him work out what he's got here.
Where you've got your trench is on those geophysics...
No, it's not!
According to Phil, his trench has been marked in the wrong place on the plan.
We did not put the trench there. We did not. The trench is in there.
Well, John told me... yeah, exactly, it's there. It's over that building.
No, Stuart. This wall here is what I've got in the trench.
Yeah.
That does not appear on your map.
Well, it doesn't appear on that, no.
So which map does it appear on?
Well, it doesn't appear on any map at the moment.
Phil has rightly pointed out that his trench isn't positioned here, but targeted on this geophys signal. And the wall he's found is nowhere near the building shown on the plan. Some of the finds, though, may be a clue to the function of this building.
It's what we call a panchion. They're mixing bowls, essentially, or food preparation vessels.
This is a great find, because it dates to the time just before we know the hospital was closed in 1540. But it doesn't help date the stone walls in this trench, because the soil's all been mixed up, and we're getting other finds like this.
Some thick glass there, isn't it?
This was once part of a massive wine bottle, which dates to the 18th century. This, maybe, is our first glimpse of the fine living enjoyed by the governor of Portsmouth, who lived here at that time.
Moving a little bit later.
Duncan Brown, our pottery expert, has been looking at other finds from Phil's trench yesterday. This, again, is high quality and is part of a Spanish olive jar. These were used for transporting olive oil and preserved fruits.
So we're late 16th, 17th century, and I would say bang on with the governor's house myself.
Well, we must be in the outbuildings at the back of the governor's house in this part of the site.
Well, that's good.
We took the measurement for the church and scaled it from the map, 50 foot, correct. The chapel, 25 foot, correct. The stables and bakehouse, 68 foot, correct. But when we checked the larder,
right,
it says it's 100
foot long.
100 foot long. But when you scale it on the map, it's only 60 foot, so there's 40 foot missing. It actually should be that long on the plan, and the stable should be up there. So we've just got this one building, which is wrong.
We can see Phil's trench is positioned across a building described as a larder. So we're talking food storage, one of the service buildings. While Trench 2 is located here, across a building described as a hall. This would be a higher status room, which seems to fit with the posh stone floor we've unearthed in this trench. It seems there was no shortage of people bequeathing money to the hospital, which means they'd have had the resources to upgrade or refurbish buildings over the years.
So maybe you've got a line of green ones and then a line of...
Here in Trench 2, where we hope to find evidence of a medieval hall, we've now got so many different walls and floors to puzzle over that Phil's been drafted across to help sort it out.
The crucial thing is if there's a green in there.
Oh, take a little bit of this.
So there is a logical pattern.
This definitely looks like an in situ floor, but it's going to take time to work out how old it is.
Look, there's the trench in red. Yeah. Look at that wall of the governor's house going through the middle. That wall there is clearly cutting that floor.
Oh, wow. You asked us to find the medieval, right?
You're not saying that that floor, which we've been banging on about as probably a Tudor floor for the last 2 days
Well, it's
is medieval.
It's at least pre-1580. If this wall's going in 1580 with the governor's house, it smashes through something that's already there. So that's either 16th century or earlier.
Oh, that is so bizarre. So we might have had the hospital for the last 2 days. Amazing. It means that in among the confusion of all this, we've now established that this floor and this wall are part of a medieval building. As you can see from this post-war photo, this area was once a parade ground used by the military in the 19th century. And it appears that any medieval buildings here were destroyed during the construction work.
You think you've got it?
Yeah, I reckon we got it.
At last we've found what we think is another medieval wall, and it's parallel to the wall we've already identified at the other end of the trench. Now it feels like we're getting somewhere.
What have you got there, Richard, for the inside wall?
21 foot 6.
By 50 foot. Is that likely for a medieval hall?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
That's excellent. That's really, really, really good. But of course, what it doesn't give us is an absolute date. Show us the pottery.
We have got 2 bits of pottery, Tony, which Duncan has not seen before. Come on, give us an answer.
Oh, that's 13th century.
13th century!
Oh, hey! We've got our medieval hall, we've got our medieval hospital. Great, eh?
Wonderful.
Apparently it doesn't get better than this. These bits of 13th century pottery come from a vessel that would have looked like this and confirm that our building was part of the original hospital built around 1212 AD. This hall was a living space and a room where food was served, and maybe it's also where pilgrims sat down to eat. We've untangled these 2 walls and the floor of the building, but much more work will be needed to get the full story. Although the records tell us it was still standing in 1581, we now know it was demolished by the time this big wall of the governor's mansion was plonked down on top of it. So although we had to correct this plan, we now believe it's an accurate layout of the hospital buildings as they were when the hospital closed in the 16th century. And we can now create a reconstruction to show what the site looked like at that time. Our medieval hall, like these other big stone buildings, would have been one of the oldest in the town and hugely impressive in a world that was still largely made of wood. Built 300 years before the big defensive walls around the town, in medieval times it occupied a prime location near the sea and would have stood out like a beacon to any pilgrim arriving at the harbour nearby. At the Domus Dei, they could give thanks for a safe passage and look forward to a bed and a free meal.
Time Team is 100% independent and funded by our incredible fans. Want us to make more episodes? Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models, masterclasses and more. And you get to have your say in the process as we develop new sites.
Lovely day for a peaceful, quiet walk in these tranquil woods deep in the heart of County Durham. But believe it or not, this forest hides an industrial complex that was behind the birth of a revolution in this country. Before we can think about any trenches, even I'm getting involved with the heavy-duty pruning needed here at Derwentcote, 14 kilometres outside Newcastle, deep in the Derwent Valley. We know they made iron and steel here from the 18th century, but Derwentcote's barely on the radar when it comes to industrial Britain. Only this steel furnace has been dug and restored by English heritage. Well, it's a good job we've got a few walls to go on, because this place isn't exactly filling geophys with much enthusiasm.
Quite ideal survey conditions.
Without being able to survey an open area, we can't really do anything.
But with the diggers filing in, we're not hanging around for geophys. We're opening our first huge trench here over these earthworks. We want to work out how many buildings there are, what went on inside them, and how they relate to these peculiar water channels, or leats, which seem to run through them. Luckily in Phil's trench, they're going great guns without the aid of geophys.
Ah! Look at that. Now, look, that edge is carrying on. It's that wall. It's going right on out there.
Yeah, we're in the road now, but you can see it.
Well, that's the face of it. Oh, bloody hell. That's interesting. That isn't demolition material. That's burning.
Which is great news. It looks like Phil's in the heart of a furnace. Just after lunch, day one, and just when you think everything's going swimmingly, you discover it actually is. You're going to need a snorkel to excavate in there, aren't you?
Well, we're certainly not going to be able to carry on as we are. I mean, the fact is the site is in the bottom of a valley. You can see over there, we are already below the level of the leak there, and the water is just pouring in.
This is the whole power supply of this site.
It's part of a water management system. Yeah. But this water management system starts actually way up the valley, up there, about 400 metres that way. Yeah. And what they're doing is managing the water from the river, diverting it through a long channel called a head race. It's a 4 metre wide channel in a dead straight line to the end of the valley. Now, that bit of wall there doesn't look like much now, but that was holding back a huge pond. Effectively, it stored water, which then you could manage into narrow channels like this to turn a wheel very gently to deliver the power you needed.
Meanwhile, Jerry has taken an angle grinder to his crucible slag and looks like he's got it out of Phil's trench just in the nick of time. I thought they were meant to be pumping it out, not letting it back in.
Look at that. Full running water.
Francis, I haven't seen you all morning. Have things changed here much?
Oh, we've been running around like headless chickens. The latest thing is that we find that the dam is largely composed of huge pieces of slag, including blast furnace slag.
This is really exciting, as we might now have the one furnace we weren't expecting to find. Blast furnaces in northeast England can be as early as the 16th century. Iron ore and charcoal were put in the top and air blown into the base, producing cast iron, used for cannons and cauldrons. But despite Francis's confidence, so far we've only got the slag and no structure. Luckily, he's equally excited about something else.
On the edge of this lead, suddenly you come across proper pucker masonry. And right in the middle of them there, that iron bar. Can you see it?
No, I thought it was a tree root. I see what you mean.
I know. No, it's iron, Tony.
Yeah.
Now, that could be the axle for a wheel. So what we got to prove next is there a hole there for the wheel to revolve into?
Industry put this place on the map. So much so, industrial spies came here.
In the 18th century, they're very worried about what was going on in Britain and all the processes that were going on. And so spies from Sweden and Germany came over to make sure what we were doing in order to protect their own market. What they're doing here is to produce out of the iron and the steel all sorts of tools and artefacts, and a lot from this valley go to the colonies. We know that Virginia hoes were made here, which must have been used in the tobacco plantations, and then lots of bill hooks for cutting sugar cane. So we can see this globalisation of trade.
Derwentcote's link with Britain's slave trade is chilling. As well as 150 tonnes of iron a year, this site made 100 tonnes of steel, some of which went directly to the East India Company. Back at Trench 2, the team's been looking for evidence of this production. And Rakshas discovered the floor of a very dirty room.
Oh, lovely. Oh, that's quite gritty, isn't it?
Very gritty.
Almost sort of charcoaly. I wonder if we're in a charcoal store.
That's really good if we found that.
It would, wouldn't it? Well, yeah. Why don't I leave you to clean it up and I'll come back later on?
OK.
Around this spot, they're also finding masses of roof tile. Looks like we've finally located the first building in this photograph. This was the charcoal store, which means this bit was probably a forge. You can see the top of the dam in the picture. And now it's been cleaned up, it looks like it's made of all sorts of recycled material. Phil, this trench has been a bit of a struggle, but you got there in the end.
We've actually now punched a hole in the culvert and used the water to wash the bricks down here, and it's been a very, very good servant to us.
It is a lovely floor, isn't it?
It's a gorgeous brick floor.
You've even got names on some of the bricks here, haven't you?
Yeah, I know. This is what I think is just so fantastic. It really does bring you into touch with people, what, 100, 200 years ago? I mean, here you've got very clearly Ramsey and then Ritson in there. But they are real people that existed. We now think that we may actually have got the crucible furnace the wrong way round.
Yeah.
It goes this way.
So what's this thing here?
Well, you see, this could be part of the original partitions that would have separated up the different bays of the furnace. So what we've got to do now is shift all our spoil and extend the trench that way.
So you are going to shift 20 tons of spoil?
Oh, no, I'm not. But he is. Perfection.
Perfection indeed. And over where we're looking for a water wheel, Rakshar also seems to be getting results.
We have a complete jumble mess of stones that have obviously been reused and put on top. But then we've got this really nice uniformed bit at the bottom there, really nicely dressed stone.
What fascinates me is that lower one with the beautiful stonework. I mean, that's your original wheel here. That is the evidence we're looking for, that we do have a wheel here.
Yeah.
You know, that's crucially important.
So finally, we've got the location of our water wheel. But it's nothing to do with the crucible furnace, which means it's evidence of other intense industry at Derwentcote. Phil, where you are, yesterday afternoon you thought that those might be recesses to put crucibles in. Do you still think that?
Oh, it's absolutely undeniable now, Tony. We have got 2 of what we think are probably 6 recesses. We've got a brick wall there, a brick pier, and then a recess. And the flue goes right the way through and comes up through there. And then we've got another brick pier and another recess. So the design is confirmed. And where I'm standing really is the stokehold, it's the engine room. So where I've been taking the muck out, they would have been shoveling the fuel in to create the fire.
And what's my bloke Joseph Brown doing, the bloke who lives in the cottage down there?
He's the crucible man. He's standing pretty much where you're standing.
I was giving up on this, to be honest. But just last thing, we have a wall.
So that's the edge of a wall of a stone building or something?
Yep, the other facing edge is just coming underneath the section here. So it's a big old wall. That's a substantial stone wall, and it's different from all the other walls we've looked at as well, because it's not fine. It's not that sort of layered stone. I mean, these are boulders that they're using here.
To me, this all points that you've got this early mill here. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think Ian deserves a
pint.
A pint.
A pint.
Yeah. I'll let you buy me. I'm a Yorkshireman.
Fair enough, Stuart. I take my hat off to you. This discovery is evidence that Derwentcote evolved from a site using water power to grind corn to a site harnessing that water to produce metal. We came here looking for an iron and steel works, but what we've uncovered is a mini industrial revolution. Derwentcote might have been overtaken by big cities, but metals developed and perfected here changed the very world we live in today. Not bad for 3 days' work.
Time Team is 100% independent and funded by our incredible fans. Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models, masterclasses, and more. Please join us on this exciting journey. We need more support to make more episodes.
As soon as you walk onto this field, you know there was something big, important and Roman here. The ground's littered with box tile, roof tile, high-status pottery and countless other classic examples of Roman occupation. It's no wonder that over the last century this site has been surveyed, field-walked and written about many times. But it's only been dug once, in the 1920s, when an amateur archaeologist called Samuel Winbolt identified it as the site of a station, an official complex of buildings used by the great and the good as they journeyed up and down the country. We may disagree with Winbolt about his description of the Mansio as an officer's quarters, but this classics teacher was a very good archaeologist for his time. Unlocking his results into the landscape and re-evaluating his work will give us a great start.
Ah! Oh, what's that?
What is it?
That's the trouble, we don't know what the quality of the floor was that Wimbold said he found. I mean, if it was a nice floor, or whether it was just these broken up bits of tile.
But the archaeologists have also identified a second target. Wimbold's records describe the Mancio as being surrounded by massive enclosure ditches. And Neil's keen to investigate these as soon as possible, because when it comes to getting dates for a site, ditches are an archaeologist's best friend.
I mean, I wonder, as a first starter for 10, whether this isn't actually going to be the natural bedrock. In which case, our building, and I think we can start to talk about a building because there's just so much demolition rubble, it's all tile, bits of tiles and what have you. That's in there. The other thing I like about it, that edge, look at it, it's exactly at 90 degrees to the Roman road.
Yeah.
I like the look of that.
But it's a bit early to break out the champagne. We may have our first piece of Mancio, but we don't know what piece it is or how it might help John decipher his abundant geophys results. To be honest, we don't even know which part of Wimbold's excavation this is. Only time and a lot more digging will tell how this small wall line fits into the bigger picture of Roman Alfoldean, a settlement that stretched along both sides of Stane Street.
Ah, now we're talking.
Is this the natural ear then, this stuff?
That's it. So that's the outside of the site. So we now know where we are.
Over in Trench 2, Rakshar and Matt have located the Mancio's enclosure ditches, or at least one of the ditches. Well, to be more precise, they found one side of one ditch. Why have you extended this?
Well, because we couldn't find an edge. We thought the edge of the ditch was going to be about here, Tony.
Hang on, let's have a look over here. So this is...
See how soft that is? That's really soft, isn't it?
Yeah, let me get my trowel into that, no problem.
Yeah.
So this is fill. We're on top of a ditch here, and we couldn't find the edge of the ditch where we thought it should be.
It's that?
Absolutely.
It is this?
Yeah. So this is the actual natural undisturbed bedrock.
Yeah.
So we can work our way back the trench that way.
The problem is, the geophys results suggest that each ditch is at least 4 metres wide and possibly up to 4 metres deep. We'll be lucky to get to the bottom of them by the end of day 3. The size of these ditches and the half-kilometre of settlement geophys are now investigating shows Alfoldean was a major focus of Roman activity in West Sussex. About 11 o'clock this morning, Neil decided to put a tiny little discreet trench in here to see if he could find the ditch which would have once gone round the Mancio. But he couldn't see it, so he extended the trench, then he extended it again, then you extended it again and again. Was all this work really necessary?
Totally, Tony. Look, here is the ditch.
Hooray!
Look, it's very soft fill, very black, full of fines. Now, just behind Ratcher, we get a change. Ratcher, can you just point out where we see the change in the earth?
Yeah, this is the lighter colour, and the ditch is actually cutting into this. It's going down that way.
So one edge of the ditch there, and another ditch just there.
Where does that go to?
Well, who knows? I mean, perhaps over about as far as here.
So we're going to extend back to here as well?
We'll see how time goes, but come this way, Tony, because this is really interesting. So think one ditch, think 2 ditches.
Yeah.
And then look, here we have, look at, very different. Yellowy clay. This must be the rampart bank inside the 2 outer ditches.
In this trench, we've got this wonderful floor, which for the first time in this trench means we've got intact archaeology.
Do you reckon this looks classy enough to be the officers' quarters?
Well, it's what Wimbold called the officers' quarters, but forget the officers' quarters. You know, he's living in a fantasy world. This is part of the Mancio. This must be part of what he referred to as the pink corridor. So we know more or less where we are, but tomorrow the real challenge is going to actually work out the exact plan of the Mancio, because that will be a real achievement.
Or not. Just as we prepare for a manic afternoon of trenching, the heavens open and the clear wall lines of the Mancio and the obvious circularity of the circular feature disappear under a sea of muddy clay. Phil, we've dug in much worse weather than this, and even when everyone else has packed up, we've had to prise you out of the trench. So how come you've stopped?
It's so simple, it's a geology.
What do you mean?
Well, This ground here has just got so much clay in it that as soon as it starts to rain, it just puddles up. There's just no way it's going to drain away.
We've hatched a plan to buy us a few extra hours digging on this rain-sodden site. We're going to cover Phil's trench with this tent and use a digger to expose clean, dry archaeology in Miles's trench. Unfortunately, the conditions in the ditch trench make it too dangerous to dig, so at most we've only one more day to get to the bottom of it. But although we still don't have a date for these defences, Stuart thinks he now knows why they were constructed.
This is about control. If you want to go up and down this road, you have to go in one gate, out the other gate and over a bridge. It's about Roman imperial taxation. It was a way of easily generating revenue to support the army. In fact, I'm just quoting from some original sources here where regulations for taxes per capita. For each slave, 1.5 denarius, for a horse, mare, jackass, mule, donkey, ox, half a denarius, and so on. If it moved, they taxed it. In effect, those defensive earthworks are like it's like a big bonded warehouse, if you can put it like that.
Bridget, what have you done with the circularity?
It seems to have disappeared altogether.
Yeah.
When the machine is clearing back, we'll be able to see the features very clearly. But of course, now we've got rain again.
Yeah.
Water starts pooling, and it just is phasing it out again. And you can see these guys out here working in it. We've got to get them out because it's just too
Yeah,
wet
they're
and claggy.
churning everything up, aren't they? Yeah, I think we ought to call it a day.
But it's not completely doom and gloom. Geophys have gallantly continued to survey this large waterlogged site, and John thinks a clear picture of Alfoldean's development is beginning to emerge. But it's getting late, so time to swap the cold, wet misery of the site for the cold, wet comfort of a pint. It was a frustrating afternoon.
Oh, very frustrating. This morning was going so well. And I thought, yeah, we can now see the walls. It can match it to John's geophysics. We're actually getting a plan of the Mancio. You know, we got the site on the run, but yeah, we've been held up for sure. What do you think, John?
Well, I think if we take one of these strong anomalies that I think is probably a pit, and then we'll hopefully get some dating evidence.
Yeah, and we can compare pottery from that with material from the ditch, from the bank, and from the Mancio. To build up a picture of how this site developed over time.
Are we actually going to be able to get inside the Mancio?
Oh, for sure. By tomorrow night, we'll know what a Roman bedroom in a hotel looks like.
Over the past 3 days, it's been a mausoleum, a Romano-British roundhouse, and then he lost it completely.
Miles, is it still here?
It's come back again. My circularity has returned. We've got what looks like the circular gully swinging right the way around the trench. So I still like the idea of that being a half, that sort of burning area in the middle, and this being a circular all around it.
But it's all Roman.
Yeah, it's all Romano-British.
So it looks like Miles's early suspicions were right. This is a Romano-British roundhouse built by the locals and part of the original settlement that was here when the Mancio was built. But this trench refuses to be straightforward.
There's a complicating factor in that just outside that circular feature, Ian's found a series of other pits. What have you got down there, Ian?
I've got a broken, but it appears to be fairly complete pot just there.
What's just the outline?
God, I can see that, yeah. So that's the whole diameter of it, isn't it, there?
It looks like most of the pot. I mean, that's the fabric.
And you've got that sort of New Forest indented beaker.
I mean, that's useful, isn't it? Because that probably is going to be sort of 3rd century AD. So again, it shows the activity here outside the enclosure is contemporary with what's going on inside the enclosure. It's not earlier, it's contemporary.
We're also at last getting near to a story for the ditches that were at some point dug to separate and, we presume, protect the Mancio from the rest of the settlement.
Yep, here it is. You can see this huge, thick, yellow clay of the rampart.
Yeah.
You can see this brown stuff here.
Yeah.
That's an earlier ground surface, and the rampart has been slapped straight on top of it.
Yeah, and this is the stuff that's coming from under the rampart.
This is the stuff that's been sealed by the bank.
It's just what we've been wanting.
This is a classic piece of archaeological dating. Because when these ditches were dug into the clay, the spoil was used to build a large rampart, sealing any finds on the ground surface underneath.
Does look as though we got the corridor as we first thought. What we didn't know was that it was going to turn through 90 degrees and go that way.
So this is actually the internal southeast corner of the building.
Exactly.
And the whole of the south range now we can sort of plot from behind us.
Precisely. You're in the corridor, I'm in the courtyard.
We're now getting an idea of just how impressive John's results are. Because with the help of the archaeology, we can filter out much of the noise on his original geophys to give us this. The actual floor plan of the Alfoldean Mancio. An impressive two-storey coaching inn, complete with its bathhouse. And at the heart of a complex with paddocks, stables, and all the other services a traveller would have expected. And we're now standing in one of the bedrooms. Right, I'm a weary traveller at the end of the day. I've pulled up into the Mancio. What do I get for my money?
You're a very important person, Tony. You would get a room to yourself, I'm sure. Good sized room, in your cum, imagine your bed, perhaps a brazier. If it's cold in winter, warm your hands, chest. You could then go out, perhaps have your dinner in the dining room, have a bath, and maybe a few alternative attractions, perhaps a few girls or something like that.
Fantastic. Did everybody get a room on their own?
Almost certainly not. I think it would have depended on your status. I mean, some of these rooms you could easily fit a number of bunk beds in, so you could be literally sleeping with 10 goat herds or something like that.
No, I'm high status.
Sorry, you'll have a single goat herd.
What's that?
This place lasted 150 years. Imagine how many people must have walked through the doors looking for a good night's sleep and a warm bath and a decent meal. There'd have been Roman soldiers and administrators and tax collectors and British traders all wandering through the rooms, admiring the mosaics, eating their food off the fine Samian ware and charging up their batteries for another day's journey down Stane Street. And quite frankly, after 3 pretty gruelling days in some fairly horrendous weather conditions, all of us will be only too glad to get back to the 21st century version of the Mancio, just as soon as we finished our feast.
Hello, my name's John Gator. Time Team is fan-funded by Patreon. This vital support helps us to make new episodes. Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models and masterclasses, plus lots more.